Step 1. Look at this question, pause the video, and come up with a plan of what's going on and how you're going to go about it. Pause the video. Okay, so let's see what information I got from this. So we know that we're using a text file. So I'm going to just highlight text file. Information about school students. Each line of the file contains a reference, a name and date of birth for each student. All information is held as strings separated by an asterisk. So we've got asterisks here, asterisks here. That basically means that, well, I know for a fact that these speech marks aren't going to be around. This is highlighting the asterisks. Otherwise it would say, actually no, I lie, it is the speech mark, asterisk, speech mark again. So it's all these three things. So straight away, great, I've got some information. But let's see it in action. So the next line actually shows it in action. So actually I was right originally. It isn't the speech marks, it's just the asterisks, which we need to focus on. So in my brain, right away, I know that I need to do this and do this. I know that without even having to look at the rest of the question. So the very fact that we're using that, what command am I going to be using? We're going to be using split straight away. So split text file. Now, the reference string may be 5 or 8 characters, so the reference could be up to 5, well, from 5 to 8 characters. So 5 to 8. It is made up of alphabetic and numerical characters only. The global 1D array levers contains the reference. Okay, so we're going to have an array. Which is 1D. And it's going to contain just the reference number. So not the name, not anything else, just a reference of who recently left the school. Great. A program is to be written to produce a new text file, updated list.txt, containing information only for students who are still attending the school. So we've got another text file, so we've got 2 text files. So text file 1, we could say is, so give us a name of the first text file. Yes, student list. And that contains all the students in the school. We're going to make a new text file. Make new text file. And how do we know we're going to make one? Because it says produce a new text file called updated or update list. And that should be all students remaining. Okay, so I've got the idea of this. We're going to have a program where my bad. We're going to have a text file. In it, it's going to have, this is all student info. Then what's going to happen is our main code is going to get all student info. We're also going to have, excuse me, an array. So put array at the top. The array will contain references of all students who have left the school already. So we've got an array, we've got all student info, and what we're going to probably have to do is write some code which will look at the reference number from each line, compare it to the array. If it's in the array, I'm guessing we have to do something. Okay. So for example, if we've got student G1234 here, and student G1234 is also in the array, when we put it over here, we check, is it in the array? Is it in the array, then that means this student called Eliza Hilton has already left the school. But if G1234 isn't in this array, which is for people who've left the school, there won't be a match. That's what I'm guessing. So where do we go from here? Well, we also know that we're going to have to be using some modules, which means procedures or functions. We don't know yet. Process student list. Read each line from the text file. Well, we know how to do that. That's easy enough. Check whether reference appears in levers. So basically check to see if the reference in the line matches the array. Check. If it does not appear, put it into a new text file. Well, yeah, we know how to do that. It then tells us to return the number of lines not copied. Well, we know how to return, which means that we're dealing with a what? You got it, a function. So I'm going to put function here. So it's basically saying return the number of lines not copied. Well, that means that we need to somehow store each time a line is not copied. So each time a student is not in the leaving list, we put it into text file, which is the new one. And then what we want to do is have a count. We then got search levers. Search levers is search for a given reference in the array levers. So this is where we actually do our searching. To see if it's there. If the student's been found, return true. If they're not been found, return false. So this is just to do the checking. So this is also going to be a function because we're returning. Count times. So this looks like it's going to be counting how many times we find a student existing already, like we said about the G1234. So this is going to be a very interesting program. So we have to break this down to steps. Let's move across to the left. And we start stretching this out a little bit. We've got a function, student list. Fine. Easy enough. That is going to read from student list.txt. Each line. For each line, we're going to check to see if that user exists already. So we're going to actually call search levers. Now, call search levers means that this is a function, so we're going to call it, and we need a value to return to. So we're going to call it like match. See if there's a match or not. If there's a match, if match is true, then, well, actually false really. If there's no match, then write the reference to text file. Okay. Return. So let's do the return outside of here. Number of lines not copied. So what we need to do is also, if the match is false, not only are we going to write to a new text file, plus increase count for lines or students not copied. Okay, so step one, I want to see if you can turn this into a function in Python. This is what I came up with. This is how I planned the code before I went into it. You do the same. Put it into Python now. For those of you who are feeling brave, see if you can actually do the whole thing, which would be each one of these functions. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going backwards and forwards to the task itself. So we need a text file called studentlist.txt. So here we go again. Make a text file, studentlist.txt. Great. I'm going to add some information. The information I'm going to add is this person. So let's put them in. Remember, we're putting it into a text file, so it'll already be as a string. Perfect. Okay. So, what else are we dealing with? I want to make a function called studentlist, read from studentlist.txt. Okay, so function studentlist. Actually, when we're talking about different programming language, I'm sorry, I've been using a different one. Def studentlist. I've been using JavaScript and PHP recently. Ooh, okay, so step one is to read from studentlist, I believe. If I go to the code again, read from studentlist. So we should know how to do that. We need to open up the file. F equals open studentlist.txt. Okay. Now we do f.readlines. In fact, let's have a variable. Let's do x equals f.readlines. Okay, and now let's do for I in x, print I. Let's call a function. Well, I don't know, it's a procedure, which is fine. So if we run our code, there we go. So, tested out so far, works perfectly. But what we want to do now is make sure that we've got nothing at the end of the line. So we need to what? If we're going to read something from a file and we've got lots of lines, we need to strip. Good. So I'm going to make a new variable. I'm going to call it strip equals x. Now, how do we strip? What was our code? So I'm going to make a new variable called strip equals the line number we're on dot strip, and let's do speech marks, and let's do /n. And if I wanted to check it, I can just do print strip, and boom. This is the next thing we need to do. All we want is up to, really we want the first bit, so the first separator. That is what we care about. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to make a new variable called split equals strip, because that's our new line after we've stripped the end. So we're now using strip dot split, and we want to split whenever there's an asterisk. And as we know, when we do this, it will basically put it into a list, an array. So if I did print split, what we should have is like an array. Really cool. But what we're going to do is we want to be accessing this. So if I want to display this, it would be print split 0. G1, 2, 3, 4. The next time it loops, it'll do it for the next line where it'll put it into an array. It'll overwrite basically the last array. So if I was to do this, and we run it, and we were to print out the array, you'll see that this is the first time we've got an array. This is the same array again, but it overwrites this one, which is fine for now. So what do we want to do next? So we managed to do the splitting, which is great. So we read from it, we split it, but we want to now do the following. We want to create a new function called search levers. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into Python. And I'm going to go to the top, def search levers. That's got search properly. Great. So we've now got two functions, search levers and student list. And all we're going to do is, well, basically we want to have a variable called match and equal it so that we've got something to store the value in. So if we call it, it'll be this, search levers, which is great. We're now calling search levers, but we want to store the return value, so I'm going to put match here. At the moment, this is returning nothing. It's doing nothing, but we're ready for it to be used. So the way our code runs, line 13 will run first. It'll then do line 3. It'll then do line 4. It'll then do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It'll then jump to line 1. That's basically how our code is running so far. But we're not done by any stretch of the imagination. So what else do we have to do? So we've got our student. What we want to do is give to search levers the reference number, which we've just split. So G1234. So all I have to do is put into these parameters split 0. What that's going to do is it's going to pass G1234. But what do I have to do for search levers for it to be able to store it? You got it. Have a parameter, and I'm going to call it ref ID. So if I was to do this, print ref ID, and turn into a procedure for a second, so let's give it a match. There we go. You notice there's no print in here, but there is a print here. So what happens? This runs, this bit, strips it, splits it, it gets the G1234, it passes it over to here, and it prints out G1234. Cool. But what I'm going to do, if we go back to the challenge, we don't really care about search levers function yet, so I'm just going to skip that, and we're going to move on and carry on with student list, because we can still program it without it being done. So to do that, let's just undo. So we've got match, and what we're saying is, if match is false, then we want to write the references to the new text file and have a count. So that's two things. Let's do the count first, that's the easiest thing. So let's have a variable called count match equals 0. If match equals false, then we want match equals match plus 1. So this is basically saying that, or count match, should I say, equals count match. It really should be called count no match, makes more sense. So count no match, found no match. So these are the amount of students who have not left the school. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the reference number and put it into the new text file. Simple as that. Put it into the new text file. So the new text file is called, well, we need to make it so f.open. The name of the text file is going to be called, should I say, where is it? Updated list.txt. Updated list.txt, and what we're going to do is we're going to play about with this, but for now we're going to do w, but it won't be that in the end. I'm then going to f.write, and I'm going to write to it the split 0, so the reference number, and then we're going to close the file. Now, to make this code even better, what I could do is simply put this f.write up here, because we're not having to run it as many times, so I'm going to get rid of it. And the f.close once the loop is finished. Now, you can see that we've got two f's, so it's going to get confusing. So for writing, we're going to call it w, our variable name. So it's not using the same as the opening one, which is f here. Okay, I don't want it to be with, just go away. So, if we were to do this, I'm just going to simply do return false. Oops, I got a problem. Let's see if we can spot the mistake. It should be w equals open. Okay, so if I go to updated list, G1234, G12345. Okay, fine. But what we want to do is make sure that we're on different lines. So how can we do it so that we can put it onto different lines when we're writing to the file? Give it a go yourself first. Okay, so I'm simply going to do w.write, and in fact we can put it after we write to the file, so w.write, and then speech marks /n, and that'll put in a new line. So if we run it, update list, so we've got our two ID numbers. Why? Because I'm returning false. This code isn't doing anything yet, but it's always going to return false, as in there's no match. What we need to do now though, if I go back to the whiteboard, is return the number of lines which have not been copied. So hold on, let me pause the video for a second. Okay, so I have slightly misinterpreted this last bit, which is return the number of lines not copied. So let's just run through this through. We get a student ID from a text file. We then compare it to, does it exist already? So basically we're saying, is it in the list? The list is, if that student, let's say student 1, leaving, or have they left already? If yes, do something. If no, do something. If they're not in the list, we're going to write it to the file, W for write. If they are in the list, we're going to want the number of students not copied to go up by 1. So if we go back to the code, okay, so let me just undo this for a second. What we've got is the following. We'll send it the ID, it will return false, saying that it doesn't exist already. So we're going to write it to the file, but we're also making this go up by 1. This should go up by 1 only when it doesn't, sorry, when it exists in the list. So, i.e. that student has already left. So what I'm going to do is, if a match equals false, we're going to do what we did before, which is write the information to the file. Else, we're going to do count, but it's not no match, it's match, if there is a match. So count match equals count match plus 1. So, let's imagine that we had a list right now, and we're going to call it, I think the exam will actually give us a list name for this. References, or reference list. Fine, let's call it that. Leavers. So these are all the people who have left, and we've got reference G1234. Okay, how many students have left our school? 1. When we run our code, the first name is, well, the first ID is going to get is G1234. So we run this 26. We then do this. We 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 do this. Now, does G1234 exist in our list already? Yes, it does. So it will not return false. It would return true because it exists. Therefore, this won't run. This will run. The next student was G12345, so it will go to here eventually, it will check it against there, and it will return false. There's no match in our list, which means we'll write it to our text file. Remember, this code is not done. It's just there so that we could use it for now, but we will get that code done. Okay. So we're then going to have to, it says, return the number of lines not copied. Well, that's easy. All we want to do at the end of this is we want to close F, close W, and then finally return count match. And if we're returning, what do we need to do on line 28? You got it, have a variable. Count match equals, and then we can print it. The result, to output it. So if I run the code so far, 0. That is because for both of these it's false, so that will run, but it won't. Count match will stay on 0. But if I return this to true, just to test this out, and I run it, 2. We've had 2 students who aren't in our list. So let's have a look at the next part. We're going to do the search levers. So it's going to search for a given reference in the array. If it's found, return true. If not, return false. This is easy. This should take us about 10 seconds, 20 seconds. So see if you can do it yourself first. If not, watch the video. If ref ID is in reference levers, return, so there's a match, we want to return true. Else, return false. So if I run the code now, there's one student which matched, which basically was matching in there, and one student which wasn't matching. Is that true? G1234, G1234, and it's only put in 12345, which is a student who's not leaving. So if we trace this through, line 31 runs, it goes to here, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this, we then jump up to line 2, we do this, we then jump back to line 16, so match would be the true or false, and we do this bit. But we're not done. We then have count times, which takes 2 parameters, the name of the array and a string. Count the number of elements that are the same as a string. So I'm guessing this is going to be some sort of search. Let's have a look. this is a bit weird. I need a bit more reference for this. Let me pause. Okay, count times is pretty simple. So let's imagine that we had, so the question says we need 50 spaces in our array already. So it wants to count basically how many empty spaces we have. So we need to create a function. So basically what will happen is if we run the function, it will count how many empty spaces, 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4 space, and return that value. See if you can do that yourself. Create a function which will basically take in 2 parameters, the name of the list, but we don't need to do that in Python, to be honest. But still do it anyway. Name of the list, as well as empty string, and then count how many empty strings there are and return it to the main code. Okay, so we're going to call it, what's the name of the function? It was called count times. So I'm going to make a function at the top. It's going to be called count times. And what it's going to do is take in 2 parameters. One is going to be for the list name. So I'm going to call it list name. And the other is going to be what we're searching for. So I'm going to call it search. And all it's going to do is we're going to do a loop in a second, which will basically be for I in list name if I equals search count equals count plus 1. So let's make a variable count equals 0, and let's do at the end of it print count times. So let's call it down here, count times, and we're going to pass into it the name of the list, which is called reference levers. That's one parameter, and the other one is going to be empty brackets, or should I say, empty speech marks. So it's going to jump to here. This will be the list name, this will be the search. So if we run this, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's counting how many empty spaces we've got left. If I do this a minute, 3, 1, 2, 3. So here's the thing, at the moment this is not a function, it's a procedure, so we need to turn it into a function. To turn it into a function, I'm simply going to do return count, and we're going to count equals count times there, and we're going to print count down here. Boom. And there we go. So this is a code to call it. This is a function header. This is a function header. This is a function header. This is a function body, the code. This is the main code.